Go to the United Kingdom now for you on the programme, where the opposition Labour Party is trying to use every legal trick in the book to force the government's hand on Brexit. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn has announced plans to hold a no-confidence vote in Theresa May as Prime Minister. That, though, is not a formal binding vote that could trigger a general election, an option the party does still have up its sleeve as the clock runs down towards Brexit. Well, Labour has accused May of wasting time by announcing a vote on the Brexit deal that will be held by January the 18th. That's just 10 weeks before the UK is scheduled to leave the EU. Let's take a listen then to Corbyn making that announcement.
I'm about to table a motion which says the following: that this House has no confidence in the Prime Minister due to her failure to allow the House of Commons to have a meaningful vote straight away on the withdrawal agreement and framework for future relationships between the UK and the European Union. And that will be tabled immediately, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Well, with that date now set for the new Brexit vote, can Theresa May get her deal through the House of Commons? And if not, then what? Calls for a second referendum are growing louder. The government says any new poll would simply split Britain further, but proponents of what they call a people's vote say it's the only way to break the gridlock in Parliament. Well, Gina Miller is one of the UK's most prominent Remainers. She's devoted months to fighting for that second referendum. And as the clock ticks down towards March 2019, her ideas are gaining more traction. Gina Miller joins us now from London. Good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us here on the programme. We know the arguments for Remain pretty well. The Parliament is gridlocked. Politicians didn't clearly tell the public what Brexit would entail. But isn't the government at least right about one thing, that whatever you think of Brexit, another referendum would divide the UK even further?
No, and they have no evidence to prove that. If you travel around the country, which I've been doing, and actually talk to people, there is a growing ask for another say, because people do have more information. We all do. But also people can see the fiasco happening in Parliament, and there is a real lack of trust in politicians from all sides that they can sort this out. So people are asking in increasing numbers for another say, because they understand that it's the only way to get through this impasse. There are a number of people who are fed up and just want Brexit to be over, but actually there is a growing call for another vote.
While there may be a growing call for another vote, we know that in general the numbers supporting Remain and supporting Leave haven't moved much in the past 2 years or so. Are you concerned that if a second referendum is held, that Leave might win again?
I don't think it's about who wins in another referendum. And I know there's some people who are saying it's all about just remaining. But I actually think this is about people making an informed choice. And if that choice is to leave again, then we have to declare, if you like, an amnesty and move on. Because as a country, we can't keep on being in this space of a limbo, if you like. But we'll have to stick with whatever the outcome is. And can I just say that this idea that the polls haven't moved, actually there is a silent majority. There are people in the sort of behind the closed doors who are saying, well, actually, we understand more. And this deal that Mrs May has brought back is so terrible that remaining is a better option than this deal.
But do you acknowledge, though, that some of the arguments made in 2016 about the economy, for example, didn't necessarily appeal to the kinds of people who voted for Brexit, that perhaps voted more on identity issues? And if there was to be a second vote, that the campaign would need to appeal to different kinds of issues. How should it look different?
I have to say the whole Remain campaign was executed dreadfully because it was more about the Conservative Party and politics. It wasn't actually about the people. And this time round, if we have another vote, it's going to have to be more about what it means to real people's lives. How does it affect their everyday communities? It has to be more about the facts, not these fantasies that are actually on both sides. And the Remain, calamities that were going to happen. You have to remember, we haven't actually left. We are still members of the EU. And what fascinates me in all the discussions that are going on is that until the 29th of March, we are still members of the EU. We have not gone anywhere.
Well, give us a sense. As a campaigner for that second referendum, practically, how could the United Kingdom get there? We know Parliament is gridlocked. There doesn't seem to be a majority for anything. That includes a second referendum. So how do you get that vote?
I think we have to go through, the process will take over now rather than the politics. And we have a deadline of the 21st of January. We know now that there's going to be a vote on the week of the 14th of January. If Mrs May is defeated at that point, there'll be a series of votes on different outcomes, and one of them will probably be on a second referendum. And at that stage, if it's backed by a number, cross-party MPs who realise that there is gridlock and there's no way out of this, then it will require an extension or a withdrawal of Article 50. It is impossible to execute a vote without an extension or a revocation of Article 50.
And what do you think then of the Labour Party's position? We've seen a lot of mixed messages from them in the past 24 hours or so. Will they call a vote of confidence just in Theresa May or in the government at large? Are you frustrated with the formal opposition that they haven't thrown their weight wholeheartedly behind a second vote?
I think one of the problems we have here in the UK is that we don't actually have an official opposition that's been holding the government's feet to the fire. They have been very much sitting on the fence, particularly Mr Corbyn, and if you look at his track record, he's not a fan of the EU. The irony is we have a Leaver pretending to be a Remainer and a Remainer pretending to be a Leaver. It is the most absurd situation, and I do say that the Labour Party in the UK is letting down the people of the UK hugely, because they're not a formidable opposition, they're not executing their job, and they should be backing this vote, because everyone knows that there is a deadlock in Parliament. There is no escaping the fact that apart from a second referendum, there's very little that will bring the country together, or actually Parliament together.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the book that you wrote, Rise. There you talked about some of the threats that you've received, that even your family have received. You're a very public face of the Remain campaign. Have you ever thought, though, because of those threats, that you should step out of the limelight and withdraw from this fight?
I find it extraordinary that I'm painted as a Remain campaigner. I actually am not. I'm a transparency campaigner. And the day after the referendum, I said we were all leavers now and that we should get on with it. But where we are now, unfortunately, is at an impasse. And it's not about Remain or Leave. It's about an outcome that brings the country together. And why I'm still campaigning is because I still receive death threats. There were chants last week when I came out of a studio to, gas Gina Miller. I'm going to carry on fighting, because this is a country where we need to subdue the voices that are now more mainstream. We cannot have a country where intolerance, racism, misogyny and hatred is seen as being acceptable in mainstream dialogue, and that's why I'm carrying on fighting. And
tell us then a little bit about those trips you said you've been doing around the United Kingdom. Presumably you've been in Leave areas as well as in Remain ones. Tell us, for a foreign audience, what have you been hearing from people?
Well, I've deliberately gone to Leave areas, and what I'm hearing is that once the anger subsides, is that we have in the UK people who feel that they are very dispossessed, that no one listens to them, that they don't have any faith in any politician. They feel that nobody's standing up for them, and that is a domestic issue. The problem is those people are wanting change and are asking for change, but leaving the EU is not the right solution. I mean, I'm not on balance, I voted Remain, and there are things we need to be reforming and talking about changing in the EU and from a membership point of view. But these are people who were told for years and years that the problems that they were facing were the EU's problems. And a number of them are now realising that actually if we leave, their lives won't get better. And it's about our domestic policy that's let down people.
Before you leave us, Gina Miller, I just want to ask you, snap prediction from you. It's the 29th of March 2019. Where's the United Kingdom? Are we looking at a cliff edge, no deal Brexit? Has another referendum been called? What does it look like?
It's very difficult. If I had a crystal ball, it would be wonderful. But I fear that unless the politicians wake up and unless they can see that there is a clock that's ticking, then the de facto outcome of this legally is actually no deal, because they triggered Article 50 2 years ago without a plan, and unfortunately they still don't have a plan that they can unite behind. So I'm very fearful that an unintended consequence of their squabbling on both sides will be a no deal, but I hope they can wake up and put it back to the people before then.
All right. Gina Miller, we'll have to wait and see, but thank you very much for your time on the programme. Gina Miller there, talking to us there this morning for our Perspective interview today.